The Russian military said on Tuesday that it had routed militants who had attacked the Russian border region of Belgorod with armoured vehicles the previous day, killing more than 70 Ukrainian nationalists and pushing the remainder back into Ukraine. The fighters on Wednesday posed for a vast crowd of assembled reporters brandishing guns and holding the group's banners. Leaders of the group said the Belgorod raid was the first step and they would conduct more incursions into Russian territory in the near future. The groups were set up during Russia's full-scale invasion and attracted Russian volunteer fighters wanting to fight against their own country alongside Ukraine and to topple President Vladimir Putin. The two-day incursion from Ukraine into Russia's western borderlands around Belgorod took place far from the epicenter of the fighting in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region and around 100 miles from the front lines in the northern Kharkiv region. It could force the Kremlin to divert troops from front lines as Kiev prepares a major counteroffensive, according to military analysts. Though Kiev has denied any role, the biggest cross-border raid from Ukraine since Russia invaded 15 months ago was almost certainly coordinated with Ukraine's armed forces, as it prepares to attempt to recapture territory, analysts said. The incursion by militants into Belgorod strengthens Ukraine's hand ahead of a potential counter-offensive, a leading analyst has said, as it could force the Kremlin to divert troops from the front lines. Kiev is preparing a major counter-offensive it hopes will eventually defeat what it says is an unprovoked Russian war of conquest.
There are a number of different positive impacts for Ukraine's defense against Russia that come from this incursion into the Russian Federation. First of all, it shows that the Russian border is undefended, and if this, of course, will cause Russia to divert troops away from the defensive lines elsewhere in Ukraine to try to reinforce that border, to try to prevent anything like this happening again. But also, of course, it's part of a pattern of events that show that Russia is not invincible, and Ukraine can, in fact, deliver damage to Russia itself. If we think back to, for example, the drone attacks on the Kremlin, exploding small explosive devices on top of one of the iconic buildings for Russian statehood, all of it undermines this narrative that the war will not touch Russia itself. We don't know, and we probably can't know, just what exactly is the relationship between all of the people who are carrying out actions within the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian armed forces or the Ukrainian state. Here, too, we've seen lots of different things which might be linked to Ukraine, which are neither confirmed nor denied by the Ukrainian authorities. But again, it fits part of a pattern that it is not just Ukraine that has an interest in undermining the Russian state and in countering Russia's campaign against Ukraine. Russia will inevitably portray this as being dangerous and escalatory, but that plays into the overall Russian narrative that anything that impedes Moscow or hampers Russia's war effort is going to inevitably cause severe escalation with the West. Now, that's been a highly successful Russian information campaign because it's constrained Western efforts to support Ukraine. And in fact, it's the reason why rules are put on the weapon systems that are supplied to Ukraine, with the West saying you cannot use these to strike into Russia. That is an enormous advantage for Russia in fighting this war because it forces Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back. There's no overall template for the relationship between those and the Ukrainian state. Let's not forget that some Ukrainian armed formations, when the war first erupted in 2014, were set up on an ad hoc basis. And here, too, we've seen volunteer groups allying themselves with the Ukrainian defenses in sometimes a fairly ad hoc manner. So we don't know for certain precisely what is the relationship between some of these groups and Ukraine's official armed forces, and to what extent they are armed, aided, facilitated, or supported by Ukraine itself.
Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu promised on Wednesday that Moscow would respond to any more cross-border raids by Ukrainian militants swiftly and extremely harshly. Ukraine's government denied any role in the raid, which has been claimed by two anti-Kremlin armed groups made up of Russian nationals fighting for Kiev against their compatriots. They include far-right figures among their leadership.